Vicki Kaufman, and I will be presenting to you an overview of dyslexia. Okay. The definition. What is dyslexia? And this definition that I chose is from the International Dyslexia Association 2002. And dyslexia is a language-based learning disability. Dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin and is characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. Secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. And I put a little video in here just to kind of give us a little bit more of an overview of dyslexia.
Dyslexia is fundamentally a language-based learning disability that affects roughly 1 in 10 people. Dyslexia refers to a cluster of symptoms, which result in people having difficulties with specific language skills, particularly reading. Students with dyslexia usually experience difficulties with other language skills such as spelling, writing, and pronouncing words. Dyslexia is a localized challenge, not a vision or intellectual impairment. Individuals who are diagnosed with dyslexia can have difficulty with reading fluently, decoding words, reading comprehension, recall, writing, spelling, and at times speech. It can exist with other learning challenges as well. The exact causes of dyslexia are not completely clear, but anatomical and brain imagery studies show differences in the way the brain of a person with dyslexia develops and functions. Most people with dyslexia have been found to have problems with identifying the separate speech sounds within a word, and or learning how letters represent those sounds, a key factor in their reading difficulties. Dyslexia is not due to either lack of intelligence or desire to learn. With appropriate teaching methods, students with dyslexia can learn successfully.
Okay, background information. The term dyslexia comes from a Greek term dys, meaning poor, and lexia, meaning with words, which correlates to difficulty with words. Dyslexia dates back to 130 years ago, so it's been around for a really long time. The term dyslexia was coined by Rudolf Berlin, a German ophthalmologist and professor in Stuttgart. Dyslexia is not associated with visual acuity, but is rather a congenital word blindness. And like the video said prior, dyslexia is not related to intelligence. It's actually a human invention, and we have to teach and train our brains how to read. So, let's continue on. Okay, so the brain and dyslexia. So we have the frontal lobe, motor cortex, sensory cortex, partial lobe, optical lobe, and temporal lobe. And these components of our brain control different aspects. So the frontal lobe, this right here, helps with speech, executive functioning, reasoning, planning, problem solving, behavior, regulating emotions, and consciousness. The partial lobe, which brings us here to this green part, controls sensory perceptions, links spoken and written language to memory, gives meaning to what we hear and read, and affects math and spelling. The optical lobe, back here, this blue part, controls sensory perceptions, visual perceptions, and identification of letters. The temporal lobe, this yellow part here, involves verbal memory and understanding of language. The left partial temporal area involves word analysis, decoding, and mapping of letters and words into corresponding sounds. And the left optical area, temporal area, involves automatic rapid access to word analysis and fluent reading. The gray matter involves phonological awareness. White matter assists with the nerves transferring information, allowing the brain regions to communicate effectively, and that's needed for reading. And then the corpus callosum is the communication bridge between the cerebral hemispheres. So that helps the information cross over between the two brain hemispheres. So the brain and dyslexia, so we have a normal brain and the dyslexic brain. So here is our picture of a normal brain here and what fires when a child or student is reading. So the normal reading brain has an activated left hemisphere, okay, in every aspect utilized for reading: phonological processing, orthographic mapping for letter and sound correspondence, for spelling and writing, identification of sounds and quicker response, for rapid automatic naming. The right hemisphere shows less activity. So there's basically not even any activity over here on the right side of the brain. You can see where the left side of the brain is firing. So we have that frontal lobe, temporal lobe, and the optical lobe. So then we get to the dyslexic brain. Has inconsistencies in the left hemisphere and the back reading system, which is crucial for reading fluency. So you can see that this one's lit. The dyslexic brain is not. It's actually lit on the other side, on the right hand side of the hemisphere. So the right hemisphere is activated in less efficient areas, which is perceived to be a compensation strategy. So the brain's trying to compensate because it's not used to reading or doesn't know how to interpret all this. So the left, and then the lower frontal lobe shows greater activation. So you can see here in the frontal lobe here, it's just a little bit in the normal brain, and it is quite a bit more in the dyslexic brain. So the left partial temporal lobe is activated, impairing phonological processing, which is needed to accurately identify and manipulate individual sounds and the structure of words. The left optical temporal lobe is less activated, affecting orthographic mapping, letters and sounds correspondence, auditory processing, and identifying sounds, and impaired rate of processing information and phonemic awareness. Gray matter is less interfering with the process of phonological processing of language, and white matter is less impacting communication of information. So you can see that the normal reading brain is just clicking, just moving along like it's supposed to. And with the dyslexic brain, there's a lot more going on trying to compensate to make sense of what it's supposed to do. Okay, so that brings us to characteristics of dyslexia. And dyslexia can be recognized as early as preschool. There are signs to look for, to watch for. And they are a delay in speaking, articulation difficulties, trouble identifying and producing rhymes, struggles remembering written information, difficulty recalling and following directions, and struggles matching initial sounds and words. And then first grade through third grade, the characteristics are continue struggling learning sound syllable relationships, consistently confuses similar visual letters, B, D, P, W, M, H, N, F, T, and misperception of letters with similar sounds, which is the DT, BP, FB. And if you think about it for a minute, when you make the sounds for d, t, d, t, you can see my mouth, d, t, d, t. It's the same for both sounds, except the t, t, t sound is a quieter sound, and the d, d, d is a more vibrating sound. And the same for b, 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 b. My mouth is still making that same movement, but one is quiet, one is loud. And also with the F and V sound, with your teeth on the bottom lip, and there again, one is quiet and one is more vibrating. Trouble recalling basic sight word vocabulary, for example, colors. Consistent errors with reading and spelling requiring sequencing and monitoring. Accurate sound syllable correspondence involving letter reversals. For instance, they have past and pats. So they reversed the ST to, to a TS. Omissions. Tip, trip, so they left out the R. Additions, slip, sip, so they added in the L. Substitutions. Rip, rib, so they substituted a B for the P. And transpositions, stop, post, so they just kind of like reversed the whole word. So exclusions of grammatical endings when reading and or writing. So they will leave off the S, the ED, the ING. And usually this is important because if you leave off certain endings to words, it's going to change the meaning. And therefore, it's going to impact their understanding of what they're reading and what they're supposed to do if they're going to apply their knowledge. Struggles recalling spelling words and utilizing spelling rules when writing. So now we have the characteristics 4th through 8th grade. So considerable difficulty reading and spelling multi-syllable words, frequently excluding complete syllables and mistakes with single sounds. So as the children progress, so does the skills. And so multi-syllables, knowing how many syllables are in words, how to count that. Unaware of word structure. So there again, prefixes, root suffixes. So they can't identify a root or a base word, and knowing a prefix and a suffix and that it changes the meanings of the words. Common misunderstanding of general sight words, where, there, what, then, when. Impaired reading comprehension and conceptualizing new information from text due to deficits with word recognition. And this is where their learning becomes more impaired because you have to use prior knowledge to connect with new knowledge to create learning. Comprehension difficulties relating to text due to fundamental oral language challenges impacting vocabulary and grammar. Substantial trouble with writing associated with spelling and organization. Following that sequential order, getting their thoughts together. And continuing into high school, college, and adult. So persistently struggles with word recognition, substantially impacting ability to acquire knowledge and analyze written material. There's a slower reading rate, ongoing trouble with spelling and writing, difficulty with note-taking, and struggles to learn a foreign language, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. Then general reading screening, okay, so most states have implemented a universal screener, a reading screener, just to kind of screen the children to see kind of where they are. I think that's a really good idea, so we have to kind of get some baseline information. So a universal screener is administrated in grades K through 8, and then they use multiple data sources in grades 9 through 12 to get information. So these screenings determine if students are meeting grade level standards and expectations. So the universal screener is used as a base to determine the need for intervention. If a student scores below the 25th percentile in reading, he or she should then receive intervention in reading. And that's just a general rule of thumb. It is recommended to screen for dyslexia when a student scores below the 25th percentile in reading to determine the appropriate type of intervention if he or she is showing signs of dyslexia. And I feel like, just in general, it'd probably be a good idea just to screen everyone that's having a difficult time with reading, because it's going to give you, it's going to rule in, rule out, it's going to show you specifically where the deficits are so that you can hone in on that and strengthen those skills. Also, if a student scores above the 25th percentile and the teacher suspects he or she may have characteristics of dyslexia, it is appropriate to conduct a dyslexia screener. So it doesn't just pertain to the children that are obviously struggling. If you feel like, okay, this child is performing, but there's something else going on, then it would be appropriate to screen. Because there's different variables of dyslexia, just like everything else. And so that will just give you some more information on that child and help guide the instruction that they may need. So screening specifically for dyslexia. So there is a specific way that you want to screen to identify this, to rule in, to rule out. And it should include phonemical awareness. That is the base fundamental part of reading. Sound syllable recognition, alphabet knowledge, decoding skills, rapid naming, encoding skills, which is spelling skills, and spelling is mostly auditory. And these assessments are given auditory. There's really not a lot of visual support in the dyslexic screening because it's a manipulation of auditory sounds. And then dyslexia and the response to intervention. Okay, so this is important. So we got our screener, we've screened for dyslexia, now we have information, and this is the whole point of doing this, because response to intervention. So students who present characteristics of dyslexia should receive dyslexia-specific intervention when administrating response to intervention. Dyslexia-specific intervention should include the following: evidence-based. It should be evidence-based, research-based, research-validated, multi-sensory. So you want to involve your eyes, your ears, and a kinesthetic touch. That way they can actually experience sound-syllable relationships. Direct instruction, so directly instructed to the child. I do, we do, you do. Systematic and cumulative. Okay, so it's going to build, each skill is going to build on the other. Instructional focus. We want to focus on phonological awareness, sound syllable association, syllable structure, morphology, syntax, semantics. Okay, so that's going to give us prefixes, suffixes, grammar, language, meaning, all that good stuff. Treatment considerations for dyslexia. So dyslexia, can't be cured, but it can be treated. And these are some ways that are good treatment methods for dyslexia. We want to teach foundational reading skills using evidence-based instructional practices, supporting reading development in grades K through 3. So our phonemic awareness, we want to go back to rhyming, rhyme production, rhyme recognition, initial sound recognition, phonemic blending, phoneme segmentation, taking the word apart, building it back together, manipulating it. Phonics, letter sound correspondence, initial consonants. So we want to kind of break up the alphabetical principle down into small components. So we want to focus on initial consonants, initial blends, diagraphs. Okay, so they can see that 3 letters make one sound, 2 letters make one sound. Ending sounds. Okay, so we got to follow through, and here's our ending sound. And sometimes the ending sound can be a blend. Vowels, Vowels are usually the trickiest component of reading. That short vowel sound, that long vowel sound, all the different combinations of the vowels and the different sounds that they make. Phonograms, blending, substitution, and vowel pronunciation. Word reading. Okay, so phonological awareness. So we want to do words, syllables, phonemes. Like just break it apart, put it back together, dissect it. You know, the word cat has 3 sounds, 3 letters. The word fish, it has 3 sounds, 4 letters. Letter knowledge, letter formations, letter sound correspondence, sound syllable correspondence, letters, graph means, diagraphs, word parts and patterns, morphology, base words, prefixes, suffixes, high frequency word parts, whole word instruction, high frequency, irregular words, spelling patterns, write and recognize words, because you want to create that visual awareness too, because not all words are the same and not all words play fair. Okay, so that takes us to reading fluency, both oral and silent. Students should engage in daily instructional level reading opportunities. Oral reading. Read with teacher support, so the teacher should be there supporting them. And you could use choral reading, which means the group reads together. Echo reading. So I read, they read. Simultaneously reading means happening at the same time. So as they're reading, learning is happening. Vocabulary words and other things as you're reading. Repeated reading, reading the same text multiple times with supervision to support mastery. Wide reading, reads many different texts with teacher supporting accurate reading and scaffolding the application of decoding skills. Comprehension monitoring. When reading, ask comprehension questions to support comprehension monitoring. So as you're reading, you want to become aware of, okay, do I understand what I'm reading? What's going to happen next? Wait, let me think back, see what's happened prior. So just to make sure that they're understanding and teaching them the skills. So as they're reading, check for understanding within yourself, which is a higher skill. But it doesn't hurt to start early on introducing some of those strategies. And the academic language skills, inferential language skills, narrative language skills, and academic vocabulary. These should be directly taught to students. Academic vocabulary when listening to or when reading text. Grammatical structure, the parts of sentences, subject, verb, adjectives, etc. Text structure, components of information and narrative text. Inferential processing, using oral and reading comprehension activities to promote predicting, problem solving, hypothesis, or contrast and connect new information with prior knowledge. And that there again, that's where new learning occurs. Accommodations for dyslexia. So, you want to maintain learning expectations. You do not want to lower your standards. You want to keep the standards high, and you want to help the student rise to the occasion, rise to that standard, because dyslexia is not related to intelligence, and usually dyslexia people are very highly intelligent. They're usually your more creative people. Eliminate or lessen the impact of the disability. Students should have access to grade level content and demonstrate learned knowledge. So don't ever, modify, keep them at grade level. Assessments should evaluate student knowledge and skills regardless of the disability. And one thing that's usually easy to do this is just oral testing, oral assessment, because you're gonna get a lot more information if they can just say it to you, talk it to you, versus like trying to have to show you and write it out. Text reading. Students should have access to technology providing text-to-speech options. This allows the student to listen to textbooks, books, and worksheets, internet research, and etc. Students should have access to audio literature books and grade level text. Students should listen to text and follow along in the actual book. This provides a reinforcer to focus attention and increase visual memory of words while accessing visual graphics in the text. And these are some websites that you can check out: Learning Alley and Bookshare. And there's usually a lot of like literature and all kinds of books just to read for pleasure, fun, literature circles, and also textbooks found on these websites. Provide oral testing or prompting upon request, meaning like they need help with a word or pronouncing a word is very helpful. And spelling and writing. Spelling words should test knowledge of specific components such as consonant, vowel, consonant, and silent E, rather than subject matter or typical vocabulary. Student spelling lists should align with the phonics-based intervention program related to patterns he or she is learning to read, and that makes a lot of sense because if they are learning in small group and working on different kinds of vowel patterns, consonant blends, what have you, utilize that information and make that their spelling test versus like the grade level assessment spelling test, because it's not always going to be where that child is performing, and you want to look for generalizations of the skill. Students should keep a personal vocabulary notebook or dictionary. Students should only be graded on content and not err within his or her spelling, punctuation, or letter reversals, because you want to look for the big picture. Are they getting the concept? Are they understanding? Lectures or directions should be recorded. Assignments should be typed, so students need access to computers. Allow oral reports or small group presentations. So that concludes our overview of dyslexia. I hope that you found this beneficial. And I also have some handouts that reinstate the characteristics of dyslexia, treatments for dyslexia, and accommodations for dyslexia. Thank you.